Hi guys, and welcome to my overview on a tournament we had this weekend. It was the Great Battle of the Carolinas version 3. It was 1,000 points and it was a teams event. So you and your partner's tournament points were tallied at the end, and that's how you found your rating. We also did the veto system. So at the beginning of each round, you would be told what scenarios it would be, and then you and your opponent would veto at the table. I ended up bringing Moria, or as I'm calling it, the Monsters from Moria. So in my first warband is the Balrog with the Dweller in the Dark. The second warband is the Dragon with Dragonfire and the Cave Troll. And then the third warband, if you want to call it that, is the Watcher in the Water. That in itself is a warband, but it doesn't come into play normally. Even in the maelstrom of battle scenarios, it is put to the side and you roll to see when it comes in. When you decide, hey, I want to see if it's going to start coming in or not. My first opponent was Minas Tirith with King Elisar. He won the roll off, so he ended up vetoing Heirlooms of Ages Past. I was actually really excited about that because I don't think I would have done well with it with just having two infantry, which would be the Cave Troll and Dwell in the Dark. I'm pretty sure the Belrog could dig to see if he could find the heirloom, but I didn't want to get into that argument. It was the first time running this army, so I was excited. So I had to choose between Hold the Ground and Command the Battlefield. I went with vetoing Hold the Ground. I was thinking with Command the Battlefield, the Dweller and the Belrog would be able to wipe out his smaller warband since he had four, and then the Dragon and the Troll would be able to take out another one, and then both of the warbands, or mine, would come together and take out his last two. That did not happen. The Belrog ended up getting put in the corner with his smallest warband. The Dragon got put off by itself, and the Watcher in the Water didn't last a round, basically. So when it came in, Elisar decided to come in as well and surround him. As you can see in the pictures, it wasn't pretty. So after about 2 rounds, when I decided that the Watcher in the Water wouldn't be surviving much, I decided to take the Belrog from his little corner and start marching him towards the center, as he had a flank of mounted coming from the right corner. The Cave Troll and the Dragon started falling back, but not before I decided to use the Dragon Breath on the Watcher in the Water, and then the Belrog got to the center, and so did LSR with the right flank. I used the Dragonfire on the right flank, knocking some of them out, and the Dweller in the Dark ended up getting eaten in his corner by, I think it was 2 Citadel Guard, 2 Rangers, and like 2 generics. The Dwell in the Dark did not perform as good as I was hoping this game. But the Cave Troll did end up blocking off a few of the mounted that were coming from where the Watcher was. And because of that, there's a little choke point in the center of the board that the Belrog was able to meet Elisar at. My opponent kind of forgot about the 12-inch bubble in the center of the board for Command the Battlefield. So by the time he got quartered and the game ended, he ended up winning by only 1 point. It was a 5-6 minor loss, and it was quite literally because he only had a model in a different scenario, based in a different area. If I had the Belrog come up a lot quicker, I could have possibly changed that. But it was a very well played game. He had few questions. I got the feeling it was the first time he either used Minas Tirith or probably the first time in a tournament scenario. My biggest problem was I was still learning the tentacle rule. I was still learning the whip, and I feel like if I had at least one or two practice games before this could have been a minor win in my field rather than his. I have seen Smog and the Witch King get a major victory off Command the Battlefield. So I think that it's just a time thing. My partner was a great guy. I loved his army. It was very well painted. And I gotta say, it was probably the closest match of the night. And it was my favorite. So round two probably left the most salt in my mouth. It was versus Rivendell and the White Council. It was Galadriel, Lady of Light. The scenarios that we vetoed was unique. My opponent won the roll off, so he vetoed assassination, and I felt like I had no other choice than to veto Clash by Moonlight, or what bows he had were just going to be that much more deadly since he is playing elves. First round, I went behind the center building trying to make sure those elves got harder shots, and it didn't really work well. They still got off all their shots. They did damage to the dragon to where if I didn't have fate, the dragon would have fled. Survival instinct did not come into effect, but I was out of fate already that first round. I found out really quick blinding light is horrible. Like it's not a horrible ability. Having it is amazing as anybody shooting a friendly model within the blinding light bubble needs to roll a 6 on the dice. And that was horrible for me. So the Belrog couldn't whip anybody into base. The dragon couldn't use its dragon fire. And I felt very distraught. My feelings got the best of me in this game. By the time I started getting up and moving towards his line, he started to use banishment more to where the dweller actually ended up getting banished basically because by the time we got into combat, it only had one wound left, and it was the twins with enchanted weapons or whatever it is that the elves do that just killed it almost instantly. The dragon end up falling backwards to take on his mounted units to try to kill his elven captain, and that never worked. Even with Dragonfire, it just couldn't get what it needed to. The Belrog never got into combat, and the cave troll didn't get close. The game did end pretty quickly, and it's just one of those things where I learned that I need to face elves more, especially the spellcasting elves. I feel like maybe if I charged more, I would have had a better chance, but the way the map was and where he deployed, I couldn't really get to him because he kept backing away, and I was trying to keep the Balrog alive and felt that if I went into combat with the twins, the blinding light, and then the banishment, he would have been eaten very quick. He ended up quartering me, or I'm sorry, halving me. And the first time he rolled to see if the game would end, it ended. I was kind of happy it did because none of the rolls were going in my favor. I couldn't really get into combat. So it just a horrible match on my end. I was, in my opinion, a poor sportsman because I felt that there was nothing I could have done in this scenario. Looking back at it, pushing the combat and just going headfirst would have been my best bet, or pulling back, staying behind the buildings, and making it to where he had to come to me because we were doing Fog of War. The Watching of the Water didn't do anything except just get elf bladed to death. So he ended up getting all of his stuff. I didn't get any of mine. So it was a 0-12 major loss for me. He was a good sport. It was just, I feel like, a horrible matchup. And this is where I need to understand that I need the training, I need the practice. I can't keep going to tournaments, painting, and dealing with basing the day of. So it wasn't on him, it wasn't on anything other than I think the map was just, while it looked amazing, and I know there was some games that did wonderful on it, I actually did great round three on this map. I did horrible in not pushing. It was all on me. Um, we also did learn that breathing fire could not target my own guys. I was always told it could, and it was something that I wasn't going to argue there. He said I couldn't. We asked the TO. The TO said he's not sure. A few other players were like, you can't harm yourself willingly, so we'll call that a no. And it's one of those things to where later on, talk to a few TOs, look over the rule books, and it doesn't say specifically, but it does allude to it. Also found out that blinding light does say only friendly models within the blinding light need to be hit on a six. So rules were explained. It was definitely a learning game, and I will give my opponent all the props because he did do everything he needed to succeed it. And he actually ended up going to be, I think, first place, him and his teammate. So I don't feel too bad about it now looking back. After round two, I found out that my partner had a loss as well. So going to round three, we both had to get major victories to try to podium. And the scenarios that we would be doing is kill the enemy scenarios. Going into it, I was near the bottom. I knew it would be either a very boring game to where I got ran over, or it would be an interesting game. And I actually got paired up against one of the local guys that I normally play with, and he brought Airborne Claimed. We talked about it rather than doing the veto, and we decided that to the death would probably be the best for both of us because we want it to be a fair, fun game. And at this point in time, both of us need to get major victories. Our partners need to get major victories. And we were just in it for the fun. Starting out, he put his dwarves into a two-man line and kind of lined them straight. He had his the hog rider and his ram riders kind of sprinkled in between there, and they were mostly heroes at that point. Well, by the time the Balrog and the dragon got up to him, Dragonfire took out, I think, 16 of the dwarves. Um, then Durin charged the Balrog, and we actually had to look up rules to see if Durin could knock the Balrog down, prone. Because it was one of those things where we've never thought about could he. So after a few minutes of figuring out, we found out that he could since he's not an immovable object like the Mumak, and he decided to not even do that. We ended up just doing basic combat at that point. The Watcher in the Water, I decided to, instead of bringing him into the center of his troops, a little bit away, and instead of charging the Watcher in the Water and having the Dwelling in the Dark right there, he actually started pulling back into one of the corners. So between the Balrog and the dragon coming around a building, he ended up starting to corner himself. Well, the dragon had just enough room to come around and start fire breathing and getting into combat. The Balrog started pushing a little bit more, and with one fire breath, I ended up killing, I want to say it was like 3 or 4 banner bears. Because as long as they're touching, the banner could go to the next person. And so every time the banner would get killed by the dragonfire, it would go to the next person and the next person. And it was kind of funny. We both laughed about it. But the game did end pretty quickly. It ended naturally, and it was a 10-2 major victory for me. Um, Bringing the Watcher in the water away from everybody and using him kind of as a scare tactic was interesting. I don't know if I'd do it again because he's slower than everybody. He's moving at 4 inches, and then his tentacles aren't as long as other ranged weapons. So while he did end up getting into combat, it was more of my opponent throwing one or two dwarfs over there to make sure that the Watcher couldn't get into the bigger group. The Dweller in the Dark kind of ended up getting blocked off by the Watcher, but it was definitely an interesting game. We both had fun with it. We were both laughing, so it wasn't a bad game. It was definitely, while it wasn't the best, as in being the closest, it was the most fun. We were laughing, we were cutting up, we looked into rules, and with both of us playing each other multiple times throughout practices and the months and everything, we kind of didn't care who won as long as one of us did because we wanted someone from our area to podium. At the end of it, his team ended up, I want to say, getting fifth. My partner, my team partner, ended up with a loss. So we ended up in eighth place at that point in time. But it was a fun tournament overall. I'm definitely going to be practicing more with Moria and definitely the monsters. I want to be able to have the monsters be competitive. Will they ever be top tier competitive? I don't think so. But I think it would be a fun competitive list because from what I've seen, you don't see the dragon because so many people are afraid of the survival instinct rule that he has to where when he's wounded, he has to take a courage test, and if he fails, he flees. That never came into effect. His fate always saved him, and when he got into combat, he was strong enough to deal with basic warriors. The Dweller in the Dark didn't do as good as I was hoping, but he did better than the Cave Troll because the Cave Troll I felt like never got really into combat. The Belrog was my MVP, but it's the Belrog. The Watcher in the Water, I wanted to play a few more games with before I say he's worth taking or not. The next event we have coming up is 750 points, and it is the Ring Goes South. And I am unsure if I want to go with a Belrog Dragon list or Watcher in the Water and Dragon list. I definitely want the Dragon in the list. I feel like he is underrated. While it does eat up points because for every add-on it's 50, extra points. The Dragonfire's 50, the Tough Hide's 50. I don't think he's as bad as people say. I feel like he could be better. So I hope you guys enjoyed this overview, and I hope you guys go to the TikToks and see what's going on. I am running a battle companies for the local guys. We actually have 12 players, and some people are just learning the game. Some people are veterans and just wanted a change of pace. This is a trial run. So if this goes over well next year or whenever we decide to run this again, we will be adding in the special rules of, oh, we're fighting in Fangon or Haunted Wood, so XYZ happens. We're going to add in the alliances and the two versus ones and stuff like that if this one goes over well. So I'll be updating you guys with all of that. Hopefully, we'll be able to get some more battle reports up. I know the guy that ran this event was doing some videos. I don't know when he'll have them up, but when he does, I'll link them. And I hope you guys have a great and wonderful time. I hope you guys get some games in. get some paint on the models, and just enjoy the game. Remember, this isn't a highly competitive Warhammer 40k style game. You're not going to get overly competitive people usually. Anybody I've met that plays this game is in it for the fun. They're in it for those epic last minute decisions of, can Durin knock over the Belrog? Can, King Elisar take out the mouth, It's those epic stories that people like to see. And a lot of times between rounds, people are talking about the lore. They're talking about the stories coming out, like with the new movies, the shows. They're updating people on stories or letters that they've probably never read. So it's always a fun community to be part of. I'm not saying Warhammer 40k is always competitive, but the events that and the people I've seen with it do get very, no, it has to be this way or you're wrong. Where, as you've heard, even here, people are willing to take the time to make sure that you're not just doing something right, but they understand it right. I hope to see you guys at the tables, rolling dice, and enjoying your hobby.